What are you passionate about? Can you show it to other people? Are you good enough at that one thing to get paid for it? Are you willing to solely focus all of your time into that one thing, cut out all relationships, have no other hobbies, tie your career, personality, and identity into that one thing for the rest of your life? These are just some easy breezy, light conversational questions that plague my mind. And also some questions that the recent Pixar movie explores. A couple of weeks ago on Christmas Day, Disney's Pixar came out with Soul. Within my circle of friends, there was a lot of buzz around it, but I wasn't actually that inclined to watch it and thought about avoiding it altogether. How do I put this lightly? I experience a lot of
existential dread.
And this movie doesn't have a super cute topic of becoming a superhero or being more in touch with your emotions. It's about a musician named Joe, played by Jamie Foxx, who, in his opinion, died prematurely, and his life was just about to begin, despite him being a middle-aged man. It explores what his life's purpose is, and what potentially happens to our souls before birth and after death. And I think about this stuff on the regular already. I didn't need some animated movie to freak me out even more. So despite all that, I decided to watch it anyway. And surprisingly, I felt existentially comforted instead. And as you can see, I handled it very well with a lot of poise and dignity. And by poise and dignity, I meant that I sat right here staring at my TV screen for a good 10 minutes when the movie was over and just cried. But it also got me thinking about another movie that came out a month or so ago, called Sound of Metal. It stars Riz Ahmed as Ruben, who is the drummer that loses his hearing. The band that he has with his girlfriend named Lou, played by Olivia Cooke, called Blackgammon, had just started its tour. And instead of dealing with his newly acquired deafness accordingly, he scrambles to find a way to restore his hearing in order for him to carry on with his life. While both movies are evidently about musicians, I think anyone who has ever had an artistic profession or has a really strong passion can identify with whatever these two protagonists must be feeling. If you were a basketball player, what would happen if you were suddenly paralyzed? If you were an artist, what would happen if you suddenly lost your vision? Hi, I'm Stella, and welcome to Salicot Cinemas, where I talk about movies because I watch too many and have too many opinions about them. It's been a hot minute since we last chatted. It's been like, 2 weeks? I've decided to do bi-weekly videos instead of weekly, but more on that at the end of this video. Today, I'm going to be exploring how the protagonists in Sound of Metal and Soul clinging to their dreams is them clinging to lies. What kind of lies, and then how they eventually discover the truth. Spoilers ahead for both movies. If you haven't watched either of them, I highly encourage that you do, because these two movies are Inner and Outer Lie. Okay, admittedly calling their dreams a lie is a bit dramatic. However, I mean specifically the narrative lies that the protagonists believe in every single arc. Ki-woo in Bong Joon-ho's Parasite believes that with a little hard work, anyone can be rich. John Wick in his first movie believes that if he kills the right people, he will be left alone in peace. Norma Desmond in 1950's Sunset Boulevard believes that she's still a hotshot in Hollywood and that she's just about to have her big comeback.
You're Norma Desmond. Used to be in silent pictures. Used to be big.
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
In every single story, the main character is introduced to a lie, which is a driving force in their narratives, and as the story progresses, the truth is revealed to them. And these two movies are no exceptions. In an article by K.M. Weiland called Two Different Types of the Lie That Your Character Believes, she explains that they're inner and outer world lies. Usually, an inner lie will fixate on a want that is either inherently unhealthy or unhealthy because of why the character wants it. Either way, the character is mistaken in believing that the want will fix all her problems and make her happy, when what she needs is to face her inner pain and investigate her true motives. Very often, the lies we believe are ones we are given. Outer lies are not lies that originate with us. Rather, they are beliefs openly acted upon in our outer worlds, whether that means the global community, a secret society, or a nuclear family. One example of an outer lie that she gives is that in Hunger Games, the lie is that oppressive governments are necessary. For both Soul and Sound of Metal, their lies are inner. But there could be an argument made that for Soul, there is an outer lie that exists within our real world that was created by whatever ism system that makes us think that we have to find a passion. And if we find a passion, we have to find a way to monetize it. And if we can monetize it, then we have found our purpose in life. The whole do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life is a goddamn lie that I hate. Not everyone has a hobby that can drive them out of financial debt. Not everyone has a thing that they're obsessed with and that they're okay doing for the rest of their lives for money. And that is all okay. If you work in the arts, you know that passion tends to die when you have to work for someone else's vision. Or God forbid you get stuck in a corporate company in an artistic position and the one hobby that used to give you life has suddenly become soulless. Ha, get it? But that is just my baggage that I brought into this movie, and that's why I cried so hard.
Existential dread.
Anyway, back to the essay. However, with both movies, the protagonists are surrounded by other people that know the quote-unquote truth, that try to clue Joe and Ruben into reality, therefore affirming that their lies are inner world, not outer world. When Ruben tells Lou that he has lost his hearing, her immediate reaction is that they need to stop performing in order to preserve whatever he has left of his hearing. His NA sponsor, Hector, who Lou calls, prioritizes that Ruben doesn't relapse and start using again. Neither of them think that he should continue performing, unlike Ruben. When Ruben enters into a home for those who are recovering addicts and also happen to be deaf, he is introduced to Joe, played by Paul Raci. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to call him Paul by the actor's name, because if I call him Joe, this is going to be mighty confusing. Anyway, Paul discourages Ruben from getting the surgery altogether, in small part because the implants would cost him $40,000 without insurance. However, in large part, it's because his community deeply believes that being deaf is not a handicap. The majority of Act 2 is in the community, and at the start of his stay, Ruben tries to fix broken parts of the buildings. Paul stops him and instead tells him that the only thing that he needs to do is sit in an empty room, write whatever he can on a blank piece of paper, and enjoy the silence. Which sounds like a nightmare to me. At this home, he's not allowed any contact with the outside world. Therefore, he has to surrender his phone, effectively cutting out his ties with Lou since she's not allowed to stay with him. Back to Seoul, Joe and 22 are constantly surrounded by people that try to tell them that their lives are not centered around their job or their passions. Joe's barber, Des, originally wanted to be a vet, and due to his finances, he was unable to attend veterinary school. Joe makes the assumption that Des must be miserable and constantly lament what his life could have been. The barber stops him in his tracks and says that he regrets nothing. He is grateful for what his career is, and he finds value in talking to different types of people. Joe's mother similarly tells him that he should take the full-time job of being a middle school teacher, because that way she can still center his life around music, but also have health insurance and steady income. It should be noted that she isn't trying to kill his dream. Her husband, aka Joe's dad, was also a jazz musician, and she knew what kind of toll that industry can take out on a person. Being a starving artist isn't as romantic as it seems. She is then highly supportive when he gives her a very long-winded speech about how much he loves music and why the Williams gig is so important to him. Pursuit of the lie. In Weiland's article, she states that, when driven by an inner lie, the character will usually transform it into a goal in the story's outer conflict. In Sound of Metal, Ruben loses his hearing just before him and Lou are about to start a gig. The next day, he gets checked out by a doctor who then tells him Ruben can only distinguish about 20 to 30% of whatever words are being said to him. His hearing is rapidly deteriorating. Inwardly, Ruben believes that being deaf is a temporary issue that can be rectified with very expensive cochlear implants. The challenge of affording these expensive implants are what drives Ruben's outer conflict. However, if we dig a little deeper, another falsality that he believes is that he needs Lou to live, and that he needs to get back onto this tour with her and continue being a drummer. He laments more about getting back to her rather than being able to listen to music or playing again. He sneaks back into Paul's computer room to check up on what Lou is doing, since she wasn't allowed to stay with him at the home, and Ruben wasn't allowed a cell phone. His loss of music isn't really lingered on, and instead he finds a few solutions to be able to drum again. Him clinging to get back with Lou is also what drives him into thinking that these implants will restore their normality. In Seoul, Joe is stuck as a middle school band teacher, a job that he doesn't feel fulfilled in. He dreams about making it big as a jazz musician, and one of his former students contacts him to audition to be in Dorothy Williams' band as a pianist. Even though Williams is famous, from what his mother makes it seem like, getting a night gig isn't new for Joe, and isn't a financially stable course for him. As he's excitedly calling people to inform him that he got the gig, he falls down a manhole, thus killing him, or I guess putting him into a coma. As soon as he realizes that he's on the brink of death, Joe's immediate thought is that he needs to get back down to earth to that gig with Williams. The lie is that he thinks this gig will jumpstart his life, and that his purpose to live is to be a musician. This propels him and the plot to find a means to get back down to his body and perform that gig. Neither movie wastes time with introducing the inciting incident. It's pretty common for the inciting incidents to happen around the 17-minute mark, hence the name 17-minute rule. Ruben loses his hearing about 10 minutes in, and Joe dies 9 minutes in. And then 20 minutes into Seoul, we are introduced to 22, played by Tina Fey, who was our other protagonist in this movie. She was stuck in the Great Before, the area in which souls get their traits prior to being birthed. Joe, who has taken on a different identity so that he can sneak back into Earth, gets assigned to mentor 22, who has apparently been taught by many great minds such as Mother Teresa, Copernicus, Marie Antoinette, etc. Effectively, she is Joe's foil, a character who's the direct opposite of him. She's never lived before, has no desire to live, doesn't have a strong love for a hobby, and she's a complete cynic. She has collected all of her trait badges that build her personality, and has yet to receive her final one, which is dubbed as the spark. She and Joe believe that the spark is whatever passion that gives a person a reason to live. Later on in the movie, it's revealed that another lie that she believed was that she wasn't good enough to become a human, which would explain why she took so long to get the spark in the first place. This lie then births the outer world conflict that drives her arc, which is that she wants to be able to give Joe her Earth badge, so she can just return back to the great before, having never lived at all. Changing for the better. Drawing back to Weiland's article again, she describes 3 ways that the characters can progress with their delusions. Changing positively by recognizing that the want is destructive or misguided. Changing positively by recognizing that the normal world represents a positive truth to which she can return, and changing negatively to further rejecting the truth and pursuing her darkness even more aggressively. Joe and 22 are both examples of how characters can change positively, but in different ways. 22 realizes that her want to stay in the great before and never having birthed into Earth was both destructive and misguided, so much so that it affected her self-worth, and that negative thought process was fueled by all her previous mentors, who also affirmed that she was not good enough to leave. However, with some help from Joe, 22 comes to terms with the fact that the spark isn't a qualification for being good enough. Rather, she just needed to be ready and would be granted access to Earth. Joe changes positively as well, but he recognizes that the normal world represents a positive truth, and literally gets the opportunity to return back to his body to continue living. At the beginning of the 3rd act, Joe finally gets to play the gig with Williams, after an argument with 22, who out of frustration just gave him her Earth badge. He had expected that the gig would change his life, but instead he feels as though nothing has changed. If anything, it felt anticlimactic to him. It is then that he finally understands what everyone was trying to tell him. Life isn't just about having a purpose and executing said purpose. It's then implied that instead of trying to pursue this non-existent threshold and standard for himself, he will enjoy his life as it comes to him. Instead of reducing his life to a list of achievements, he has learned to appreciate the small things. Ruben, similar to Joe, does achieve his outer world goal of getting the surgery to get the cochlear implants after selling every one of his possessions, including the RV that he lived in. It is when his hearing aids get activated that he is hit with the reality that his hearing will never be restored to what it once was. Rather than clear sounds, the implants include a lot of distracting feedback that is exhibited really well with the sound design. He then flies to Belgium to go be with Lou, who moved there to be with her father. There, he realizes that during their time apart, he and Lou have become 2 very different people who no longer fit into each other's lives. Ruben is disillusioned from both his lies of him needing the implants to return to the norm of his life, and that Lou was his soulmate. I would argue that inwardly, Ruben did not change for the better or for the worse. He just changed and finally adapted to the loss of his hearing. His life or his outer world, however, is arguably worse than where he started off with. He now doesn't have a home to go to, no longer has a girlfriend, and he no longer has a career or his hearing. However, he isn't rejecting the truth, nor does he pursue his lie more aggressively. Instead, he packs up his things and leaves while Lou is asleep. After some walking, he sits on a bench alone and takes off his hearing aids to bask in the silence, just like Paul had initially encouraged him to do. Admittedly, Ruben's arc isn't as existential as Joe's or 22's are. His story is much more centered around the reality of what it's like for someone who has just lost their hearing, and grappling with other struggles such as addiction. One is trying to teach us a lesson of enjoying the small stuff in order for us to lead fuller lives. The other is an empathetic, non-romantic view of what it's like to lose your hearing. However, both Soul and Sound of Metal put their protagonists into predicaments that are relatively permanent, and they have to deal with their insecurities and their inner lies first in order to properly address said situation. Thanks for watching my video. Like I said earlier, I used to be on a weekly schedule, but I decided to go bi-weekly because I have a full-time job, I am a one-person team, and I want to get better at writing these and also editing these, but also actually watching movies, so I want to give myself more time and not not self-impose this grind that I don't need. I might pick up the pace again later on, but who knows. I also plan on having a few pop-up surprise videos for when certain movies are released, and then I'll try to do a same-day review for that. So make sure to click that bell so you turn on your notifications for me so you don't get to miss those videos. I also have an Instagram down there that I have neglected to acknowledge properly. That's where I post some updates. Anyway, I've been Salakot Cinemas. Thanks for watching. Bye.